Where, oh where are all the female guests? That was the title of the blog post I wrote for the TVO website a couple of days ago. The reaction was fast and furious and continues. So we've invited some of the respondents to join us. We welcome, in alphabetical order, Laura Babcock. She is president of Power Group Communications. She's also a former CBC reporter. Sandra Jonas, a producer on The Agenda. Sherry Graydon, founder and CEO of Informed Opinions. Bridget Kwame, writer and health and wellness expert. Piali Roy, freelance writer. And Robin Urbach, columnist for the National Post. We want to remind you that our online editor Daniel Kitts and producer Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud are hosting a Twitter chat right now. Chime in, let us know your thoughts using the hashtag AgendaTVO. And we welcome everybody to the program today. I must confess, I'm looking forward to this discussion quite a bit. Sherry, to you first, because you were here, we did this sort of a year and a half ago, where we considered the question of why it's so tough to get female guests on programs. You've got some data about this. What does it say?
Our data is that women are reluctant for three main reasons. And number one is that they are time challenged. That shouldn't be news to anybody. Expert men are time challenged as well, but it's still true in 2014 that women bear more responsibility for stuff on the home front. And women, that's certainly an obstacle. If you ask a woman to wedge another appointment into her scheduled challenge day, she has to be really clear that it's going to be worth her while. That's number one. The second reason is that women hold themselves up to a higher standard of authority. They're less willing to shoot from the lip. They're less willing to wing it. If they're going to go on television, they really feel like they need to have read the research. They need to know the recent research literature. They need to have all their ducks in a row. They can quickly think of the three other people that know this issue better than they do, and so you should really talk to them.
And those three people are, chances are, men.
Well, they may or may not be. The thing that we tell them is that if you blow off the journalist is going to call somebody else, and it's not going to be the best person. It's going to be the guy in the next office who you know, and guess what? You know you're as smart as he is, so just do the interview.
And number three? Number
three is that because they're held to a higher standard of authority and a higher standard of appearance, presentation, they're less willing to take the risk of going on air and being trashed for things that have nothing to do with their intelligence or expertise. And sometimes that's appearance, sometimes it's sexuality, sometimes it's gratuitous references about who knows what.
So men will not get criticized for the tie they picked or the whatever, but women will get criticized for the clothing they wear or the hairstyle or whatever.
Look at Hillary Clinton, really. And also they get comments about their sexuality or what people would like to do to them in a way that men don't get those comments. So yeah, those are big deterrents.
Why subject yourself to all of that is the
Especially if you don't feel like you need the limelight in the first place. Women want to have impact, they want to make a difference, they just don't need to be front and center doing it. They are often happy to do so from behind the scenes. They're more interested in the impact than the profile.
So if we were convening a discussion about whatever, and we ended up with 6 men around the table instead of 6 women, would there be anything lost by virtue of the fact that the gender was all one way instead of another?
I think so. When you think about the lens, the filter that women have on the world by virtue of the experiences that we have day to day, our experiences are qualitatively different in all sorts of arenas. And so missing 50% of the population from any conversation, whether it's the environment or the economy or health or education, you're missing context and perspective that is likely, in some cases, to be qualitatively different. And there's a growing body of research literature about what happens in countries to democracies when women don't have a voice, when they're not educated, when they're not part of the civic conversation, and the entire nation is at a loss as a result of that. So,
or conversely, how democracy's improved if there are more women at
absolutely.
The cabinet table or whatever.
Sure.
What are you doing about this?
We are training women to translate what they know into short, accessible, newsworthy commentary. We are encouraging them to overcome those 3 obstacles that I just mentioned because it's important that they do. And so we're giving them incentive and skills and confidence to say, yes, it is really important that I not defer to others and that I speak up and share the ideas and analysis that I have, and that I avoid reading the trolls who are going to trash me, and suck it up and just go on and speak my piece.
I think many people remember that moment during the presidential debates where Mitt Romney referred to the binders full of women that he had access to when he was governor of Massachusetts, so that he could put women in high positions in his cabinet. And so a year and a half ago, a kind of a takeoff on that expression, we did a program here, which we nicknamed Binders Full of Women, in which we considered these very issues. And Sherry, you were a guest on that program. And I wonder, what's changed in a year and a half since we did that?
Oh boy. I'm not sure a lot has changed. I mean, we've probably trained another 300 women who have agreed and have said, yes, I'm willing to be listed in your database of experts. It does seem to me that the Twitter conversation that erupted as a result of your blog post is really rich and robust, and so perhaps social media has given lots more women a voice and a way to engage that they didn't have as much 18 months ago or whenever we did the show. But I have to say, I hear from broadcasters and journalists all the time that it's still difficult to get women to agree to be interviewed.
Well, let's give voice to some of those who were on Twitter, and we're going to call this part of the program Paikin the Pinata, because I want to give you a chance to say, okay, Bridget, come on in here. You know, I wrote the blog post.
Right.
I guess I should confess off the top, it wasn't, some of it was inelegantly written, can I put it that way? Some people had a lot of problems with it. Mm-hmm. What should I have said better that I didn't say in the piece?
One thing I really think you should not have said was equating some of these issues and differences between male and female responses to DNA. Mm-hmm. So whether that was just kind of a, maybe an ill-timed joke, or whether you actually believe there is something to that, I had to pause as soon as I got to that statement. And to me, the only thing that screamed out was, this is like a basis for scientific sexism in a way. And to me, that comment was extremely reductive in terms of the overall discussion, and very defeatist, and to me untrue. So that was something that I really had a problem with, because I thought that if we're looking at biology, then what's the point of having the rest of the conversation? We'll just chalk it up to, those women, science says this, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I really think that the biology aspect could have been left out, and there needed to be more of a respect and reference to some of the societal impacts.
Okay, hold on. Let's take these things one at a time if we can.
Okay, sure.
Because the DNA reference was a reference to, I think, something you just mentioned, which was men either feel a need or have no hesitation bloviating from the mountaintops about what they feel, whereas women don't feel a need to be in that line. That's what I meant.
It's
Is
not
that
biology,
not what I said?
though. It's not DNA.
What is it?
That's a socially constructed, reinforced notion. If a woman speaks and she's shot down, she learns very quickly, as Charlotte Whitten famously said, I have to be twice as good in order to be thought half as effective, so I need to be twice as good. So it's not about, it's in our DNA not to comment. It's that, there are lots of social reasons that preclude against us wanting to be in the public eye.
Anybody following up? Laura?
Everything you described was a male response, is how I respond to media appearances. And everything you suggested as a woman's response is not the response that women I know who are experts in their fields and intelligent and leaders in their communities, when they get a call about doing a show like this, that's a quality program, that has a good reputation, a talented host, they would say to themselves, there's a value proposition to appear, bad hair notwithstanding, I'm going to do the agenda. So the thought that we would somehow be so superficial, or in fact so incapable of prioritizing our lives to do the program because we're insecure that we might be seen to be not intelligent or this or that, does not apply to the women in my world, Steve. And I take issue with not just the tone, which came across as condescending, and some of the examples, which I thought were sexist, but the premise that your show, with your reputation, cannot get the female guest, despite all your efforts. I know of a program that you did in my town, featuring my city. You had on my male friends. All of us are civic leaders. None of the women I know who could have been on that panel got a phone call. And this is Hamilton. I love the guys you had on. They're good friends of mine. We sit around the same tables in Hamilton. Did I get a call? No. Did other city leaders who are women? No. So I think there's more networks that the agenda can have. I think there's more reach, and hopefully this show and Twitter will facilitate that. But I had a lot of problems with it, and if this is a DNA argument, then I must be the wrong gender, because it didn't apply to me, Steve, in any way.
I hope, you know what, I'm not sure now, but I hope I put it out there as I'm wondering if it's a DNA thing, as opposed to saying it's a. I don't think I would have said it.
It sounded more like it was a declarative. It sounded like you were saying, if there's one thing we've noticed, there's a DNA thing. Men would never say this, men would never say that. And can I just touch on, and I'm sure we all want to dive on this, at least I do. I have a 3-year-old daughter who is with her Nona, so I can be here. I try to work my schedule around media opportunities because I think it's incredibly important to have my voice out there as part of the Canadian conversation. So I structure my business and my life that way. But if I could not get childcare, it would not be an excuse, Steve. It would be a reality of a very busy, difficult life.
I got to tell you something, Laura. From Sandra Jonas and a number of the female producers on the agenda, they all came at me and they said that was a bad word to use.
It was.
So a learning moment for me, to be sure.
Good.
Kelly, you wanted to say.
Well, I was thinking basically when I read the piece that I was gobsmacked that this basically came out of your mouth and
fingertips,
that you
actually.
and your fingertips and that you actually put it out there. And part of it was that you gave the excuses, as you put it, but never kind of put that extra paragraph saying, well, why are those excuses being offered? Do women actually have more responsibility for childcare? We know that statistically they do. I was called to be on this show. I didn't have a childcare issue, but I actually had an elder care issue. So I had to switch an appointment for myself and my mother that I was able to easily switch so that I could be on the show. But if it had been a serious doctor's appointment that took me 4 months to make, there would have been no way that I could appear on this show. So those are things that women are facing and are just happen to be part of their responsibility.
But speak to this. If we try to book a male guest, the male guest never says, now maybe it's the case, but the male guest never says it, I got to take care of my kids, I can't come do the program.
He just says I'm not available.
So,
or I'm at a meeting, or I have to travel, or maybe something else.
Yeah, he just says I'm not available.
Or his wife is available to take care of the children.
well, that was my point. He'll try and get his wife to cover off, if he's married with kids, whereas I can't recall trying to book a female guest and having the female guest say, I'm going to see if I can get my husband to cover off. They just say, well, I'm on duty and I can't do it.
Well,
That's a difference between men and women, isn't it?
I think one of the issues that was kind of overlooked in some of the discussion about your blog post afterwards, I think there's a real difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. From what I know about your program, and I know of your producers, that they're great people, and they do try and reach out as much as possible, and they do make those connections. Perhaps in some cases, they're not always reaching out to some women that we would think of, but they are trying to make those connections, and the outcome just isn't there, from what I gather from your blog post. So I think there's a difference there, and we need to sort of look at, well, these are the reasons. We're not going to call them excuses. We've sort of decided that's a bad choice of words, and that's fine.
I learned, yes.
But I mean, we need to talk about, well, how do we change those sorts of things? And I speaking personally, I know my colleagues, the immediate colleagues that I work with, are all men, and many of them have young children, which I don't. And I usually find that I'm the one that's taking on the extra work after hours because they want to go home and spend time with their wives or pick up their kids from daycare. So although it might be something that we've sort of talked about as a woman's issue, especially when it comes to childcare, I think that is changing. And we do need to acknowledge, perhaps maybe some of the guests that you've had on haven't said that explicitly, but I know, just speaking in my workplace, there are a lot of men who...
It's a thing.
Right, it's a thing. They go home to take care of their kids, and I think that also is something that maybe men just aren't saying explicitly,
Okay.
but it affects them too.
Let's hear from the one person we haven't heard from yet, and this is actually the person who is at the center of this. You're here today basically representing all of our producers here, who
Yep.
are, I guess, 5 women and 8 men, including me.
Producers, I checked, we are 4 women and 8 men booking. I got into a little
You were
argument
about to
with
say
someone.
something different. Yeah.
I got into a little argument with someone over this on social media last night. We have been, at one point, we were 8 men, 5 women, and I'm only speaking about the people who contact guests and book. For the longest time, when this show first started, we were very static as a staff, and we were 7 women and 5 men.
But now we are where we are. And
We rotate, we're fluid.
I wanted you to be part of this because I think people need to understand what you do when you try to invite guests to participate in a debate on the agenda. So take us through it.
Okay. Well, first of all, Mr. Tone Deaf, I just want to point out that some of the reasons he did point out were actually reasons that guests have given all of us, and I've heard some of them. In an ideal world, Sherry would be on the shoulder of a guest and be the guest whisperer telling them, just do it. In an ideal world, women at the top levels of their fields would not feel constrained for any reason and just do it, or they would at least be part of a network of people who could recommend them. I don't think we've reached that critical mass yet where you call the best guest and they know of 5 women who I can go to instead. We're getting there, we're just not there yet. What usually happens is similar to what Sherry told you. I will call a guest and they will say, they may say to me the truth, usually if it's a woman, and maybe because I'm a woman, they will say to me, look, I either have childcare issues tonight, or I have this meeting and I have to appear here and I have to make sure I make it there in time, and I don't think I can squeeze this one thing in. It's a little easier for us now because we do tend to tape a lot of our programs in the afternoon, and we find that childcare isn't as much an issue in the afternoon as it would be in the evening. So that's, luckily we're dealing with that. But there are other issues, and let's face it, we do judge women by a different standard. We have a female fill-in host, and they don't write to her about, that question you asked so-and-so, I didn't quite agree with that. They'll write to her about her hair. It is an ugly fact of life, and we're still, societally, we're still there. And so a lot of women, let's face it, they're smart. They know they will be judged for this. We judge each other for this.
Let's be honest, you didn't want to come on today.
I didn't want to come on. Our executive producer constantly thinks
Who's a woman?
Yes, and our executive producer prior to her would always think of reasons to get me on the air or on a Google chat on screen, and I would always just ignore him because I'm not comfortable on screen. I admit it, and the first thing I said when everyone kind of forced me into this was, "Oh my God, what am I going to wear?" I admit it. So I'm no different than any of the female guests we have on.
But just peel back the layers of the onion a little bit more. We've heard, I can't get childcare, I can't do the program.
Right.
We've heard other things like, I know I'm going to get hell for this, but I'm sorry, I've heard it, and as soon as I put it in the blog post, I got 5 emails from other women who said, absolutely I wouldn't go on the air if my roots were showing. And that is one of the explanations
it's an ugly truth.
we got.
We want to look the best that we can look, let's be honest.
It's television, it's a visual medium.
Yes, and these same women would jump at a chance to speak to a print reporter
But it's not just women. I train all kinds of men in media appearances, and they tell me how nervous they are about their appearance, if they look heavy, if they look older.
They're nervous, yes.
But they want me to address their physicality before they do any kind of media op. So it is an issue for men. Now, do they get the same criticism based on their appearance? No, they don't. And having done TV, I've gotten a lot of it.
I want to circle around to something. The beauty of doing this is that people watch and people respond. You mentioned the Hamilton show that we did, where we had only male guests.
Yeah.
I just heard from the person who produced that program upstairs, and he whispered to somebody in the control room who whispered in my ear, Mark Brosen's our producer, called 6 women for the Hamilton show. None would come in and do it.
I'd love their names. I'll give them heck for it, Steve. And now you know me, you can call me for Hamilton. But the point is that the women who, just to make this point, the Spectator in Hamilton had a list of who should run for mayor. Myself and other women were on that list. We weren't the ones who were called by the agenda. So it just tells me that there is room for your provincial show to get better localized networks. And as an example, you said we're not quite at that critical mass point. I heard from the head of a YWCA on my drive-in who said if the agenda wants the Ys to come up with a list of experts and talk to them about media availabilities and getting over some of those issues, they would do it. So I think that your post, while the intent was great, and I never doubted that. Coming from someone with your integrity, some of it was a little surprising because coming from you, it was a bit of a shocker. But if it gets us to a point where your job can be done more efficiently and we can get past some of these roadblocks for women, I would love to see that as a result of this, Steve.
And I think there's not a problem about calling 10 women. I mean, that's the thing, is if you want to make change, calling 3 women and it not working out, well, call 6. You did call 6. Call 10. Have a really big pool that you're working with.
How is that? Well, let's just figure this out. We do a daily program here. We're not booking a conference one day a year. Is that feasible?
No, because as you get closer to taping day, you get really nervous. You can't, because apart from booking guests, we have a show to produce. There's a lot of work that goes into actually producing the show. And if you're still chasing the day before, you're not going to get that show produced.
Oh, sorry.
No. And so for that reason, there has to come a time when you have to call it, right? And
You got to get who you can
you
get.
got to get who you can get. And, you know, I will not, I don't think I could probably count on one hand a show that I've had with all men, because quite frankly, I won't watch a show with all men. That's my own bias. I'm sorry, I
Robin,
don't.
what about that?
I do sort of think, I understand what you're saying, and I do understand the perspective where you want to call as many women as possible. The other thing is, you know, and now I'm speaking as a viewer, if I'm tuning in and you're having a show about the Elections Act, per se, or whatever it is, I want to hear a discussion by the most qualified, the most eloquent, the people who know what they're talking
Even
about.
if they're all men.
Even if they're all men. And sometimes, you know, oftentimes, the best person for the show will be a woman. Sometimes it's not. And I wonder when, and it's sort of an unpopular opinion, once you start getting a woman in the chair just because she's a woman, I start to wonder, how qualified is she?
Do we do that?
No, I mean, obviously the very first thing I look to when booking is that how good a speaker are they? Are they engaging? And obviously I'm not calling them because they don't know their field. I'm calling them because I know, before I even make that call, I know that they're an expert in their field, or else I won't call them. What I'm looking for initially once I call them is how engaging are they? I found a wonderful woman on an economic show where it's very hard to find women. I went through the usual Rolodex, and you know, for some reason or another, I'm sure it wasn't for any of the reasons mentioned on this show, but they just couldn't make it. So I went down, I found someone who was amazing, had amazing credentials, she had amazing experience, she was so passionate and engaged on the telephone. What happened when she got on air? I don't know if this is something we do, maybe through conditioning, but once she spoke, she felt she had to say everything she knew with each statement. And she was in her head, and she spoke in such a halting, uncomfortable way. And I just thought, oh, what happened? You know, what happened? She was so fantastic on the phone. She got very self-conscious on air.
Bridget, though, can I get you on this? Because this is a follow-up. I got this from a woman named Lori Bellhouse, who just, I literally got 1,000 emails, tweets, 1,000. I mean, we were lucky if we get 100 most days. We got 1,000 on this one. Hi, Steve. For what it's worth, I'd like to see guests on your show who really know what they are talking about and are excited for sharing their knowledge with your viewers. Sometimes they're female, sometimes male. The gender thing is something I don't even think about when watching. What do we do about that?
You know what? That's the diversity of life. So, and you're never going to have somebody who's 100% happy with every single thing. I think.
No, I know, but do I try to satisfy the people who are on Twitter who were saying, you idiot, how can you do a show with all men?
No,
or this person here.
That you want 50%. You said you want
I
gender
do.
parity. So you set out that quota. You set out that. I'm in agreement with you. I want to see the expert, someone who's telegenic and engaging. If they're male, female,
Not
I
a
don't
quota.
mind quite as much.
I wouldn't use the word quota.
Okay, you said you want 50%, or you want parity.
Yeah, gender parity.
Yeah, you're looking at having a certain amount of women on your programs, and you're looking through a gender lens to get that. I like that you're trying to get more women on your shows. I think that's important. At the end of the day, if only male experts are available and you really have tried, that's understandable. That happens.
Bridget, you wanted to follow up.
Right, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to say also that it's your integrity is on the line as well with the show.
Such as it is.
Exactly, as we're seeing. But my thought is there are going to be some people who may say, I just want to see the best expert. I don't care if it's a man. I don't care if it's a woman.
And is that legitimate?
That is legitimate for that person, that's fine. But you're going to have, which I'm sure you understand, the other people and the range of people who are probably on Twitter and on social media discussing this, who don't feel that way and who want to see the representation of the society we're living in. So the decision comes down to, what is the agenda going to do? Is the agenda going to say, well, our perception is, okay, we'll just go with whoever's the best and we won't worry about the gender parity? Or are we going to try to represent?
Sherry wants to say.
I was just going to say, I'm not even sure there is ever one best person. And if you've got a show and you've got 4 or 5 or 6 guests on, the diversity of perspectives is really valuable. And on any given issue, you're going to have at least 2 or 3 people who are as knowledgeable, but they might be coming at it from different angles. And I guess the other thing that occurred to me in thinking about shows where there are only male guests, and if that is a regular phenomenon where it's hard to avoid that.
It's occasional here. It's not regular, it's occasional.
So part of the question for me is, who's defining the subject matter, and that
this is a great question.
itself
Okay, let's
might
get to that.
leave out.
Let's get to that. Because here's what we cover on the agenda, okay? We cover politics, foreign affairs, national affairs, provincial affairs, labor, science, economy, business, healthcare, crime, justice, social policy. When we are looking for experts, we are looking for experts in fields that are overwhelmingly dominated by men. So we're fishing for lakes, we're fishing in lakes where 80% of the fish, most of the time, are male.
All sorts of those topics you just mentioned are not 80% male.
Not only that,
How
but I
many
have a
foreign affairs
woman in each category I can think of
we
recommending.
can all think of one woman in each category. That's not the issue. Can you think of a woman who'll say yes when we
Yes,
need her?
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'll
have
call
the
them up.
same list in my head.
Yeah.
It's there, and I think part of it is, I've heard this phrase, we're fishing in streams and lakes. Well, there are a lot more lakes and a lot more streams that need to be fished in. And also, let's say we're talking about economists, and you want the economist who wrote the report. Well, there are other people who you can call who can talk about that report. First of all, the researchers who were involved in writing the actual report were
Don't you
involved.
want the author of the report, whoever it is?
Usually the author is the person who wrote it, may not be the person who has their name to
Okay.
it, but also the people who use the reports. So people who are in agencies who may not have the title of economist, but they are the people who actually have to make do and figure out how this report applies
Okay,
to their
but
agency.
I hear you, Piali, but here's the reality. I know she meant to be helpful, but somebody tweeted to me after this all happened, said, I do children's books, and I have some wonderful female children's authors that we could bring on the program. And I'm sorry, we don't cover children's literature on this program. We have made a decision. Here's what we cover. We're going to try to do it in as much depth and in the best way we can. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff we're just not going to cover.
Can I make a suggestion, though? And I'm not, your producers obviously have been producing an award-winning program, so you guys know what you're doing. But on this particular issue, let's take, for instance, the head of the YWCA of Canada, I think lives here in Toronto. Doesn't need to be booked just on women's issues, probably is fully apprised on all kinds of current affairs,
Sure.
can weigh in on political issues. So I just think that going subject matter by subject matter sometimes limits the guest potential. Some of us can speak to more.
Jump in though, because I work for the comment section of the National Post, and we obviously, as newspapers scale back a little bit, we are constantly looking for people to write opinion pieces. We will take anything. I'm not the person personally who handles some of the submissions that we get, but in terms of opinion writing, we will take anything. We've written about, sex workers, daycare, current affairs, politics, basically anything you want to write about. If you send it to our deputy editor, he'll look at it, and a lot of the times he'll send it back and say, well, this isn't quite good, and it doesn't matter who wrote it.
But that's the op-ed page of your paper.
Right.
That's not us. We've made a
Right,
decision
but-
that there's some stuff we do cover and some stuff we
Right,
don't.
but what I'm saying is, in terms of that, we probably about 70 to 80% of the people who do send in submissions are men, and we don't give them any guidelines. We basically say whatever you want to write about. If you want to send it to us, we'll take it. So I think that's an interesting point too. You could make the point that women are being limited by the subject matter that you're talking about on this show, but in terms of our newspaper, we're not limiting the subject matter, and we're still getting overwhelming submissions from men.
One thing, Sherry, one thing that we talked about in our editorial meeting was, for example, we did a program on self-driving cars last week, and we had 4 car guys around the table. We'd actually, I think, finished the program with a 15-minute one-on-one interview with a female automotive expert, but that particular debate, which was 35 or 40 minutes, was 4 men. And we asked in hindsight, should we have just canceled the show? Should we not, if we can't get a female guest so that we look more representative of the population, should we make a decision not to do it? Is that a better solution?
I guess I'm having difficulty with the premise that you're anticipating not being able to get a woman because of what we're talking about here and the fact that there are so many women. So I don't think that's the solution. I don't think that's the route I would go. And in response to your comment about the op-ed pages, I've interviewed op-ed page editors across the country, and women don't write op-eds. That's one of the reasons informed opinions exists. We're training women to do that. But of the hundreds and hundreds of women I've trained, very few of them have expressed interest in getting into your paper, in part because of who else is commenting and the sort of dynamic of the paper. The other thing, though, is that often op-ed page editors will say, and I've had a national op-ed page editor say this to me, when women submit, they only want to write about women's issues. Well, I would like to eradicate the notion that there are women's issues. Well, A, it's not true, but B, if a woman is writing about something, it's an issue, and you know, sexual assault is not a woman's issue. Right. Sexual assault is a man's issue, frankly, because
health or education.
So
would you? Women's issues.
Let me put. Laura used the word quota a while ago. Would you, as a booker, as a producer who books guests,
No.
you want to have a quota that you have to meet of female guests?
I don't set out to produce a show thinking that, oh God, I'm not going to get any women on this. I just know it. I always like to have a female voice. That's why I seek out a woman. In the case of economics, I don't think it really matters whether it's a female voice or a male voice. But there are other topics where, yes, it matters. And I'm sorry, I know that the head of the YWCA is probably wonderful on a plethora of topics, but she's not going to be able to talk about security in Sochi for our athletes, which, by the way, I had parody on that particular program.
No, but on Steve's list, he talked about a number of things in current affairs and politics, and some of these things are broader than just people who have direct roles.
Some of them are limited in terms of the number of experts and people at the top of their field, but that is changing. In academia, we're seeing it change. We're seeing more women, more visible minorities in academia. It's changing. They might be coming into these fields that are not quite at the top of their game yet, but in 10 years from now, I really don't think this is going to be an issue.
I hope it won't. And I'm sorry, if I can just, there's one thing that you brought up. Three of the reasons women don't do it. One was, you know, how they're going to be criticized, and one was on being knowledgeable enough. I do think that those are real issues. And I speak at, I'm sure we all do, at women's groups where we're trying to teach women to say, you can come up to speed. What you know is still important. You don't have to have everything crossed off to be on the panel. You can go in with more confidence than maybe you think. So that is a reality, and I'm not sitting here suggesting. I mean, I've been in media for 20 years, so I've gotten through any issues like that I had. I think it does exist, and I think it comes with training, showing our daughters that we're on TV talking about important, difficult subjects with confidence, and that will let them mirror us and believe that they too can do it more easily. I mean, there's work to be done in our society, Steve, and I think that's coming out of this program. So I'm not trying to be glib and saying that because these things don't apply to me, those things don't stop me. I've had a lot of experience at this, and I do think it does stop some women, but it shouldn't stop women. It shouldn't be a factor.
Laura, we book a lot of people out of academia just because of the type of program we are. And I've done media training for people in the health sciences field, people who are academics, and they say to me, I hear what you're saying. I hear that I shouldn't ever think that I don't know as much as my male colleague. But if I step out of turn, because this is my specialty, and I go to speak to all these other specialties, yes, I see my male colleagues do that, and we talk about them behind their back. How dare they? I don't want to be that person. And this is a bigger issue within academia, and I've had that happen to me with guests time and time again. I'm sorry, this isn't exactly my field. I cannot speak.
Let me do a little, I've got to do a little bit of fast business here, which is, you're watching The Agenda on TVO. We would remind you, we're talking about this on Twitter as well, so hashtag AgendaTVO. Please weigh in with your views on trying to get more women on TV, which we're not doing a bad job of tonight, but we're not doing a good enough job on the rest of the time. The word quotas came up. Do you think, and it's not just this program, I look at the op-ed page of the Toronto Star today. It's 3 white men who've got pieces on the Toronto Star today. Do we need quotas?
To play devil's advocate, why not? I mean, why
How would
not
that work?
push the barrier?
How would it work?
I'm actually more interested in having a few shows where they're all women. So go past quotas. One thing that was a really interesting social media experiment that took place last year was with this tech blogger and entrepreneur named Anil Dash in the US. Now, he has 500,000 followers, and he decided that he knew that he had the ability to amplify voices, and he chose to only retweet women's tweets for 1 year. And he said, oh, okay, it was a little difficult at the beginning because I wasn't used to it, but actually I really got into it. I expanded the conversation. I ended up learning a lot more. And because I had a tech audience, I ended up talking to people about issues that they weren't used to talking about. So for example, a lot of women he was now following were talking about stop and frisk in the US in terms of police, you know, like carding in Toronto. That became an issue that more people got to learn about because he chose to do this. So this idea of expanding the pool of, I think, is something that's working. We've seen it also with someone like Andy Carvin for NPR. Now, he was the voice of Arab Spring. Why was he the voice? He was actually just sitting in the US tweeting, but what he was doing was looking for voices on the ground in Cairo, in Tunisia, wherever, and just saying, okay, what are they saying? And he would then actually ask people to translate, what was being said on this YouTube video. And all it did was expose his audience to what was really happening on the ground, not just from the CBC reporter or whatever.
Robin, then Bridget.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to take issue with that, and it's another somewhat unpopular opinion, but I'll go for it anyway. That was the part of the blog that actually irked me. I looked past all the other stuff I didn't really care about. I realized that the root comment was probably someone actually gave that to you, but the part that stopped me was the part where you said that you strive for gender parity. And I can understand that as a goal, and I can understand trying to temper that with getting the best guest available. The problem that I have whenever the idea of parity or quotas or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it.
It's a target.
Right. It's a target, but what it does, I can't help but personally find it somewhat patronizing, because by setting that target, you're sort of saying, well, we need to make sure that these people who couldn't get there by themselves need this extra help. Okay, but what I'm saying, let me explain.
A lot of head shaking there.
Let me explain. This is something that we see a lot of, especially the Ontario government, for example, had this plan about a year ago to make sure that companies had a certain number of women, or had a plan for getting women in senior positions, and if they didn't do that, they had to explain it. And I think there were two problems with that proposal. One was that I think, in my opinion, it undermines the achievements of the women who are already in those senior positions. And number two, it kind of creates this atmosphere, whether or not we think it's justified or not, but people start to wonder, well, did that woman get into the boardroom because she actually deserves to be there?
On talent or quota?
Exactly. So, I mean, while it's a negative side effect that isn't something that should be there, that discussion does happen. We can't avoid it. And I think bringing up the idea of gender parity or quota, it incites that type of discussion.
Okay, Bridget, then Sandra.
So two things I want to touch on, and just the idea of the unpopular opinion of looking at quotas and things like that. For me, there's a level of privilege that comes with not needing to look at quotas or looking at embracing and trying to engage different voices. So I don't think it's necessarily that if you're looking at a quota and you want to call it that these women or these people of color can't get there on their own. However, when we're looking at the channels that we have to make an impact, there are very few channels. So if a channel like The Agenda wants to make an impact and wants to have that gender parity, I'm all for it, because as a Black woman in Ontario, I want to be able to have an opportunity to get my voice out. I may be able to go to, some other local cable networks and things like that, but nobody's going to have the reach like The Agenda has. So I honor and respect that idea of parity. I don't know how I feel about calling it a quota and what those numbers would be and what that would look like, but I just feel there's a level of privilege when we say, well, you don't need to do that, and those people can't get there on their
Bridget,
own.
what should we worry more about? Having guests 50-50 male-female, or having diversity, quote-unquote, all different ethnic backgrounds represented on the program?
I think diversity is the overarching umbrella of it, and with that, you're going to have so many different voices.
So
because
6 men on the program would be okay as long as they're from different ethnic backgrounds.
it would be. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it may welcome different voices. So if the idea is to kind of be representative of the environment we're living in Ontario, which is a very diverse environment, if there was a program and it was all men, but they were men of different cultural backgrounds, I'm going to look at that and say, wow, I don't know the last time I've seen a Black man on The Agenda, or it's been a while, or I don't know when I last saw, a Sikh man on The Agenda. That's going to be interesting. Let me hear what he has to say. I think that within
you wouldn't
that,
say, where's the woman?
You know what? Maybe that's my perspective of also being a woman and a person of color. I'm looking at it from both ways, perhaps. So it may be different for somebody else.
Why does it have to be one or the other?
Exactly.
Really, why can't it be both? I mean, you want to reflect your audience. Your audience is half female and really culturally diverse. So, sorry, you got to do both.
Although I do think that's something that The Agenda does tend to do well.
Yeah.
You do see among panelists all different sorts of backgrounds.
Well, 15 years ago, I didn't believe in quotas either. I've come to see through my own experience and through discussions with others that sometimes I'm glad we don't have hard and fast quotas on the show, but we do have a commitment to put females on the show. We do have a commitment to put people of color on the show, because that is who we broadcast to. Our show should reflect our audience. Our show should reflect that the diversity of opinion out there. And our show is all about the nuance. So that is perfect for this particular argument. As I said, we really work hard. This is why the topic that we're discussing today is a topic we discuss upstairs at our editorial table all the time. It matters to us. It really does.
Can I push back on one thing here, which is, I did get this on Twitter, which was, your producers are lazy. Tell them to try harder. And I really found that infuriating because, I mean, you produced a program the other day. I got an email from you at 2:30 in the morning. I mean, we all send and receive emails in all hours.
We're married to the show.
It's not good, but it's true. So I didn't like that.
I don't think at any level you guys are lazy. Like I said, you win awards, you're well respected, you do a good show, it's always quality programming. But I think what it comes down to is, now that you've blown this out, and you're hearing from those of us, and like I said, that offer from the YW, could you not have better networks and better resources helping your producers to expand those Rolodexes, to get into other communities they might not have reach into?
Laura, do you think we can do 50-50? Do you think anybody can do 50-50?
But, you keep saying the word okay. Would this be okay? Would that be okay? I don't look at it like okay or not okay. I look at it as, did you do your very best? Are you using the tools available? Is it a quality show? Are we hearing from people with qualified, interesting opinions? So to me,
you're
it's not...
dodging.
No, I'm not dodging. It's not. I don't care about 50-50, Steve. What I care about is, let's go back to that Hamilton example. Really, those three guys, excellent guys, but I want to see that list of women that you called and why you didn't call others.
We'll get it for you
You can
afterwards.
do better than that. So it's not about 50-50. It's about, could you have done better on some shows? And I think the
Not about
answer
all or
is
nothing.
Laura, I mean, it's so, we were inundated with lists of women and references of amazing women. That's not the point. The point is that, communications experts give us lists of women all the time. But when you call them, we get a lot of those reasons. We get a lot of that hesitation. And
The point is getting them to say yes.
Yes.
and what is the proposed value for me taking this 3-4 hours out of my day on 24 hours notice to
my
put everything
job is
aside
to
and do
court
it?
people to come on. I'm not kidding myself. And it's my decision as to whether I apply soft pressure or hard pressure. And you gauge that, right?
So, but that's my question, is what is the value proposition for women to engage in the media dialogue in this country?
Well, that's above my pay grade.
But I think that's the heart of this. Do women make the decision that there's an ROI on my time to do the agenda or other
That's
shows?
why I thought the whole issue of roots was actually really interesting. The idea that there would be some women who said, oh, I won't come on the show because my roots are showing.
The person who said that is incredibly brilliant.
And
I think we have the clip. Can I
have the
please?
clip.
Yeah. Control room, Sheldon, you got this clip standing by? Was this Armine Yalnizyan who said this? Okay. Wonderful economist from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Roll tape.
I'll tell you how I think you make it safer.
Sure.
I think you have more examples of brave women doing it, just doing it. Like Hillary Clinton doesn't look excellent all of the time, and the job she's doing is excellent. Like women that are willing, like myself, to go gray in public on air, right? Because you don't see a lot of women going gray. I don't have the time, so it doesn't look perfect. At some stage it will. But, people being a little bit less fearful as women and trying it. We are the ones that are going to make it safer for more of our sisters.
Do you think you'll get an email today, though, from some viewer who will say, what's with the gray hair?
Seriously, no, I may and I don't care.
Amen. Bravo to Armine. How do we get women to yes?
Well, I just actually wanted to go back to the point about roots, which is, when was the last time you appeared on this show with your roots showing? 1 inch of roots. And that's the thing about what you were saying about what's my professional
I don't get that. My roots are showing all the time. What do you mean?
I'm not sure your roots are really showing, actually, if I take a look at curly hair.
It's not as evident.
But the thing is, if you're a researcher, if you're an economist, and you've been working on a project for a long time, and you have not had a time to do your hair, and your roots are showing 1 inch, what's your professional look going to be? And how are people going to take what you say as an expert and as a professional? They'll probably question it,
Kelly,
and that's why people won't go on the show.
I wasn't questioning that explanation. I acknowledge it's a double standard, of course. But what do we do about that double standard? How do we get to yes?
So I have a little, in my bag, a bunch of postcards that you can hand out to your producers that are things that you can say to women when they say, I'm really not the best person. And it's really about reminding them of the bigger picture and giving them an incentive to say, okay, yes, when I defer to my male colleagues or when I defer to somebody else and women's voices are absent, these are the consequences, these are the implications, these are the costs. women, we find in the training that we do, are really motivated about making change. They're not motivated by the glamour of being on TV and being trashed for their roots. But if you remind them of the bigger picture context and say, if you decline, I'm going to go to the guy in the office next to you. Is he the best person?
You ever tried that line of?
That'd be the hard sell.
I have. I've done the hard sell. I've said, listen, and it was, I think, to the woman who we just showed, you know, you are the best at your field, and I'm sorry XYZ is in the way and Z is in the way and you can't make it, but I have had those conversations. Sometimes I win them over and sometimes
But the question is, I mean, it's partly about that, is my appearance, does it trump my substance? Is it style over substance? But there's also, and I hope that women learn, you know, being substantive is more important, and you'll get trolls no matter what. I can have the best hair day and I'll still get criticism for my weight. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? What I think will really help is if girls see more of us taking that risk, getting over that fear. You know, I want my daughter, who's 3 now, to see mommy on TV so much that it would never occur to her not to speak her mind and to get in there. I mean, that's how we model change, is by actually having the courage to do it. So it is a bit of a hard sell to say, you know what, here are the ramifications if you don't, if your voice is absent, but also here are the benefits if you do. Look at all the girls who are going to see you. And I have to say that in Canadian media, I have been impressed that some women that don't fit the stereotypical TV person are starting to get more airtime. Even in the US, there's some notable examples. And I love to see that. Age is not such a factor anymore. Body shape is not such a factor. So we're getting there, Steve.
Let me ask you, your daughter's 13 now?
Yes.
She's 13. I presume it's important to your daughter's mother that your daughter, when she flips on this program or catches you watching it or something.
She's beat me on television. She's been on television before. I asked her this question this morning. I said, if, you know, forgetting, I said, you know, if someone asked you on TV, would you go? And she said, well, I've already been on TV. And I said, well, if someone asked you about your area of expertise, and I came up with some examples, and she said, yes, if I had something to say. So I don't know what to make of that.
It's different.
Oh, that's classic. If I had something to say. Women actually think that. Well, if I have something to say, I'll go on. If they decline an opportunity, sometimes it's because
They have nothing to say about
unlike,
it.
you know,
Yeah, whereas a man
I'm not naming my husband, but no, he always has something to say. But I told this story last time about we were invited to give a streeter about the death of the Pope.
This was, you got to set this up.
So
Pope
it was
John Paul II just
2005.
dies.
We were walking through the parking lot of St. Patrick's Basilica in Montreal. A streeter crew approached us and said, the Pope has just died, will you comment? I said, no, I don't think so. And David behind me said, sure, I'll comment. And he bowed his head and he solemnly declared it's a sad day for Catholics everywhere. And he made the national news. And as we continued on, I turned to him and said, that was kind of obvious, wasn't it? And wouldn't it be great if the next Pope were to come up with a progressive policy on contraception that wouldn't disenfranchise millions of impoverished Catholic women around the world? And he said, well, Sherry, you shouldn't have turned down the interview.
But my 11-year-old also asked me about what I was doing today, and she didn't understand the question.
What? Sorry again?
She didn't understand this question, you know, why is it a problem to bring a women guest on the show? She didn't.
So that's a good sign.
That's a good sign. You know, she's living in a country where, you know, we've had more women premiers than ever before. For, you know, younger generations, this isn't a problem.
Do you know what? I did get one very cute tweet about that. We're saying, why aren't the women guests on TV? Because they're all off running 85% of the provinces in the country. Or provinces covering 85% of the population of the country. That was one of the things.
I do wonder, though, like, is it something that we are going to, first of all, that's a funny story, and I think kind of we have to look at it both ways. On the one hand, we have to encourage women who aren't so forthright in terms of going on TV. On the other hand, I think the men who do go on TV and they don't really know what they're talking about, that's not a good thing either. So we want to find a middle ground. But I think it's interesting what you say, that trend is happening more and more for young girls now, looking at women in med schools, looking at girls in law schools, our premiers, all over the place. There are these powerful, strong women in various different successful positions. And I think it's going to become almost innate too, especially as the next generation grows up a little bit, that they do see these women in these powerful positions, and inherently it gives them the confidence to think, okay, I can do that too.
It's like that apocryphal story about Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, the president of Iceland. She was president of Iceland for 16 years, and when she retired, she was watching the news coverage as they interviewed her replacement, the men who were running to replace her, and her grandson turned to her and said, but grandmother, they can't be president, they're all men. Because an entire generation of Icelandic
On
kids.
social media, not only do, as you said, more women have a voice now through social media, and that's encouraging, but the generations that are following us are on camera all the time. You know, they live their life on Insta and things. So for them, the transition into this media is not a big of a deal as people who were never on a video and then suddenly they're on a video in front of the entire province.
That's a good point.
So it's going to change
I've
things.
seen the difference just even in streeters, because early in my career I had to take a camera out and get streeters, and it was very difficult to get people to talk. Whereas if you put a microphone in front of someone who was American, they knew that they were born to have their 10 seconds of fame, and they were clip
Regardless
ready.
of gender,
They were
that is
clip
true.
ready. And you know, I'm noticing it more and more with Canadians. We are coming out of our shell. We are a generation that is exposed to reality TV, social media. Younger people are on camera all the time, and it really is changing.
Yeah. Let me throw one more clip at you folks here before we wrap up. We've got a few minutes left. We convened, I think, were you part of this too? We had our producers a year and a half ago.
Yes, that was, yeah.
Right, and Stacey Dunseith, who's now our acting exec producer, talked about trying to get more women on the program, particularly when they have that second shift when they come home from work. Roll tape, please.
I'm so busy and I gotta pick up my kids. I have heard that from male guests who have declined to come on the program as well, but I hear it from women. And as a woman who has, sorry Maurice, as a woman who does have to run around like crazy, I get that.
Picking up kids and doing all that
Picking
stuff?
up kids, doing all that stuff.
But you've never heard a male invitee say, sorry, can't make your program tonight, I gotta pick my kids up from
I've
daycare.
had two. I've had two.
that happen.
You
I've
have?
had two very
It's refreshing.
high-profile.
That's actually encouraging, yes.
Yeah.
Sandra, you're wearing the same colors today. Yeah, that's good. Different top. Okay. How do we get around the explanation, he's learning, of got childcare issues, can't appear on the program as a result?
Yeah, why did you scoff at the idea of daycare?
Who scoffed at it?
I've
in the
taken
blog.
care of someone's child
It
in the
seemed
green
like in
room.
the blog it
Wasn't
was
very
like-
good at it. I didn't
wasn't
have
so
skills.
bad.
But the question was,
On
well,
Twitter you
what-
did, it
you'd
already
be like,
off
well,
a
why
little
would
bit.
I've
somebody
done all my
trust
own
their...
kids here. What are you talking about?
And that's the difference, because you bring your kids wherever you go and you don't think twice about it, but a
Right.
woman will. She's like, well, I can't just bring them and dump them there, which is what
So if
you
I
do.
knew, you know what, I would love, I try to organize my life so I can have media availabilities because that's my business, but I would love it if the shows that called me said, oh, we've just started a kids program, Laura, our staff has it here, you can bring your child for the 20 minutes you're on set. Because it's 2 hours to get to some of these shows, 2 hours to get home, I'm on for 10 minutes, and my kids have 5 hours of babysitting for that. So maybe it's partly the communication, Steve, to these guests to say, I didn't hear that in the offer to come here today, that there was childcare. I had a lovely follow-up email from the producer, but I didn't know that was
So we
part of the
should
problem.
be explicit in offering
Of
that.
course, of course.
That's
Put
one
the-
thing we
into
can
the
do.
equation.
Yeah.
If that's something you could do, being explicit, because probably some women don't say that. I wouldn't say as some
Can I
men
ask a
don't.
question though? What? Of course I can. This is what we do. If you're a mother, are you going to trust your kid with somebody you've never met before, you haven't vetted before, but who just happens to be someone who's going to watch your kid in the green room while you do your 20-minute
Depends how
TV
old
show?
your kid is.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely
And if
depends.
I'm
If
15
it's
feet
in
away
the green
and-
room right
Exactly.
next
Shouldn't
door.
say mother if you're a father too. I mean,
Yeah, sure I would.
Yeah.
If it's a show like this and you have regular care for guests when they bring in their children and they're just around the corner in the green room, then I would probably be okay with it after a certain age with my kids. But the fact is, I didn't even realize it was an option, and I think we can communicate that.
I've gone to the gym, they've offered childcare. I've gone to Toronto District School Board meetings, they've offered childcare. I know that they are offering good childcare. I am assuming that is part of the package. I'm not assuming you've picked up someone off the street and I'm just dumping
Okay.
my kid with them.
I got 30 seconds left. What's the role that men have in all of this to make this change better?
Men, the first word that came to my mind is listen and understand. The first two words I would have to say. The issue is not, like Sherry was saying, a lot of these issues are not just women's issues. So even what we're talking about today with where are the women, the female guests, there are issues and implications that men have to assist us to be able to get to that gender parity. So men need to know what role they are playing as well, which is, I was talking to my husband about this, and he said, well, I'm expecting now. He says, well, if later on you need to go do something, I'll definitely be the one watching the child. But I don't know if that's a common theme across the board. So men need to be equal partners in this so that we can be equal partners in the show, equal partners in the province, and equal partners with everything that we're doing. So it's not just to sit back and say, oh, okay, what are those women talking about? It's I'm engaged in this as well because this is part of my environment and what I'm living in as well.
Congratulations. I didn't know
Thank you.
That's great. That's great.
Thank you.
I can also say, occasionally, You know, I'm not the best person. Talk to my wife. Or talk to my female colleague.
Nice. We got to go. Time's up. Time's up. I want to thank all of you for coming in today. That was really a splendid discussion, and the education of the host continues, which is all good.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.